This video is a continuation of a series that was started a very long time ago, in which the goal is to point out the many inherent flaws of the MCU's female characters. This isn't to say that these characters are bad because they are female. Far from it. Rather, the point is to say that Marvel already had a stellar female roster built up in the comics, who all got downgraded when moving to the big screen. So we're breaking down each one to see what went wrong. Next up in the series will be the characters of the Black Panther films. Starting with Nakia. In her debut, Nakia started out as a fairly average love interest to T'Challa, being portrayed as someone strong and independent, without much depth beyond that, leaving her to be rather forgettable. She was originally a lesser villain in the comics, who emerged out of jealousy because Black Panther pursued another lover over her. She then faced off against T'Challa in a small number of comics, before being forgotten. Clearly a high priority character to smear all over the movies. But to be honest, she really just felt like a basic placeholder, only there to kill time until they could replace her with Storm, T'Challa's much more popular love interest. But things wouldn't play out that way, as T'Challa would be killed off to mirror the real life passing of Chadwick Boseman. This was a massive mistake for Marvel to commit to, for many reasons, several of which pertain to Nakia. As without T'Challa, this character just wanders aimlessly with no purpose. Her infiltration of Atlantis and Wakanda Forever was neat, but ultimately just a pointless waste of screen time. With how many other popular characters and storylines Marvel has in their vast library, why are we wasting so much time on this empty void?
Hey, I like Nakia.
Oh really? Alright Nakia fan, show me your Nakia merch. I'll wait. This is not a legitimate character, and we don't have to pretend otherwise, especially when she's attached to a franchise that is packed to the brim with dozens of characters. Speaking of which, we should also talk about Okoye, because she also bloats the cast, and as far as action goes, she and Nakia tend to fill the same role, with the main difference between them being that Okoye has a spear and Nakia does not. This problem is exacerbated with Okoye also not being a particularly well-developed character, and is one who also suffers from along for the ride syndrome. Her character can best be described as someone who the writers really want you to think is strong and funny, and boy, they don't really succeed on that latter part.
Walking around here with that ash on your head. Oh, it's funny. No, it's not. I told you. You look good.
Her motivation is that she is loyal to the ruler of Wakanda, and that's fine enough as a motivation, but unless she has something more profound going on with her story, do we really need her to be this heavily involved in the adventure alongside all these other characters? Such others would include the likes of T'Challa's sister Shuri, and Shuri is someone I find to be incredibly irritating.
This corset is really uncomfortable, so could we all just wrap it up and go home? What are those?
We didn't think of it.
I'm sure you did your best.
She is a profoundly cocky and disrespectful person who also happens to be extremely intelligent. Sound familiar? She is Iron Man, but even more perfect. Tony Stark at least suffered greatly in the early films as a result of his poor behavior, and he was shown to be a deeply flawed and negative man. Not Shuri though. She can just say whatever and do whatever consequence-free, and she's even established to be smarter than Tony Stark just because. When it was revealed that she would step in as the new Black Panther in Wakanda Forever, that could not have been a worse selling point for that movie, especially considering the actress playing her is built like a stick man. She could not believably beat someone up no matter how much super strength they told us she had. But even if she looked like a superhero, she's not nearly likable enough to star in a leading role. There are plenty of other characters more deserving of a solo film than her, male or female. Also, we talked about characters stepping on each other's toes earlier. Well, Shuri falls victim to that flaw as well, because, for some reason, Marvel insisted on introducing Ironheart in Wakanda Forever. Ironheart, aka Riri Williams, is a cocky, disrespectful person who is also extremely intelligent. Sound familiar? She is the exact same character as Shuri. Honestly, I don't understand why Marvel would even bother involving her, aside from apparently being really desperate to have another Iron Man type person around. Riri takes the Iron Man comparisons a step further by suggesting that she is just as, if not smarter than Tony Stark, and suggests that the only reason he is more famous than her is because he is a nepo baby who had it easy thanks to daddy's money, even though we know that isn't true because we've seen Tony Stark thrive without money on multiple occasions, while Riri remains stunted, not because she is poor, but because she is very, very dumb.
Where's your arc reactor? That's like...
You know, they don't exactly hand those out.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
This is the type of character you get when the writers know nothing about the world that they're writing for. But here's the thing, Ironheart should never exist because she's a waste of a character, though if they really wanted her there, they could easily just have Shuri fill that role because they are the exact same person. Then you could have someone else play the role of Black Panther, ideally someone new recasted as T'Challa. There are just so many characters who take up space that don't need to be there, and only dilute the appeal of those who already exist. There is no need for Ironheart in any scenario, and it doesn't help that her character design is miserable. She's bad in the comics, she's bad here. Some of you may shake a fist and say, well, what about War Machine? Why does he get a free pass and Ironheart doesn't? And that's a good point, because yeah, at least in the movies, War Machine has a lot of the same problems as Ironheart, in that he kinda just takes up space without having much purpose for being there. However, in the comics, he is much more useful, in that this world treats secret identities much more seriously, so Tony often has Rhodey pose as Iron Man to throw people off from thinking that they're the same person. War Machine also rarely has any notable impact on any given scene he's in, even though his hefty firepower should make him stand out as incredibly dangerous, even when compared to the likes of Iron Man. So yeah, they did War Machine dirty too, and his character deserves a lot better than shallow cameos. Cassie Lang went from being a cute, harmless kid to an obnoxious Antifa-style jailhopper who would rather punch cops than use her family's tech to easily remedy the homeless crisis in her story. She also gets her super suit off screen, and is apparently competent enough to easily obliterate MODOK by herself. Kate Bishop is just female Hawkeye, and her ability to just easily take down the once highly revered Kingpin is really frustrating. Many die-hard fans will ingest a lot of copium to try and justify that scene, but the original Hawkeye is already severely underdeveloped, so copying and pasting his character only dilutes the Hawkeye name. The appeal of Hawkeye is to show how enough ingenuity and skill could allow a normal human to keep up with superpowered peers. This appeal gets lost when you suggest that his talent is not exclusive, and random teenagers could just as easily fill his shoes. She-Hulk. This vile green creature and her show is anti-entertainment, and it was deliberately made to be terrible in order to piss off fans. This is according to the writers themselves. They could have made anything, but they chose to make this. She-Hulk started out as something of a self-aware joke in her early days, but evolved into a more serious character over time, with countless storylines and team-ups that were very well liked by fans. She had great runs with the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and had distinguished roles in most of the major storylines. With all this to say that her show should have been one of the easier successes, given her popularity. Unfortunately, like all the other female characters, she was stripped of everything that made her interesting, and was downgraded into simply being a megaphone for third-wave feminism, with her most heinous sin being that she was elevated at the expense of Bruce Banner, with the show telling us that she is a much better Hulk than he is, and she suggests that getting catcalled was somehow comparable to all the suffering that Bruce Banner endured.
When I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
Yelena Belova, just another copy-paste Black Widow to replace the one that we lost. Because stakes just don't matter in these stories. If any character dies, they can easily be replaced by someone who is just as capable, with just as dramatic of a backstory. But hey, at least this one has an accent. She also stands out in her ability to use the power of friendship to defuse enemies that she barely knows anything about. Miss Marvel. She was a dumb waste of a character in the comics, and is an even dumber waste of a character in live action. I feel sorry for her actress, because getting stuck with this character cannot be healthy for her young career. Echo, the ultimate poster child for diversity and inclusion. Do you know this character has her very own show, and it's been out for months? Have you ever heard of this character prior to me bringing her up? She is a deaf superhero who got her powers passed down to her by her native ancestors. So she's like Daredevil, but even more special. Unfortunately, she has never been popular, and will continue to be unpopular, because her story simply isn't interesting, and the only reason she has a show is so she can serve as a diversity checklist. That is seriously all this character has going for her. Again, they could have made anything, but they chose to put a spotlight on this irrelevant F-tier character. It blows my mind that people could be stupid enough to think that this show was a good idea. The Eternals, a bunch of obscure characters from the comics, who were completely changed when brought to live action to be more diverse and inclusive. This team in their film is the ultimate example of the MCU higher-ups thinking we'll just watch anything, so long as they slap the Marvel logo on top of it. This movie has nothing to do with Marvel Comics at all, and is not worth wasting time on, except to say that Black Knight deserved better. But hey, at least they had that cool fight scene. If only it was in a film worth watching. Agatha Harkness. She was there all along, but she didn't really do that much, and was actually kind of a hero in a roundabout way, as Wanda was definitely the villain, and Agatha wanted to steal her power, though she failed and is now suffering an extremely brutal fate for really not being that bad of a villain.
Wait. Did I leave the oven on, or is that just you, hot stuff?
You live here now. No one will ever bother you.
That was, of course, until her show with 1000 Names came out, in which we learned that Agatha is actually an extremely terrible serial killer with a kill count in the hundreds. But you should feel bad for her because her son died. Just ignore the part where she didn't feed or house the boy. All you're meant to do is give her your mindless sympathy. There's Carly, this super intimidating terrorist that we aren't supposed to call a terrorist because that's an offensive term, even though she's most definitely a terrorist.
The terrorists only set us back a bit.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
There's still people in there.
This is the only language these people understand.
You have to stop calling them terrorists.
Sylvie, just a literal female Loki, whom is better than the real Loki in every way, but will also have a weird romance with him. That's right, we get a Loki on Loki love story before we get Enchantress. This bird is an Egyptian superhero.
¿En si superhero Mostrella?
And that is her whole personality. She is here to replace the longtime Moon Knight love interest, Marlene, because the Moon Knight showrunners are actually racist and didn't think Marlene's skin color was good enough for the show. By the way, if you want to see a vicious rant about the Moon Knight show, you should like and subscribe and I'll make it happen. Here is Katie, as portrayed by Awkwafina.
Hi, my name's Gina. I'm gonna go into hiding. My new name's Gina.
This is a movie original character with no comic ties whatsoever. Monica Rambeau is the totally necessary character full of story and purpose. She just adores how Wanda brainwashed and choked this entire town, and will defend Wanda to the death in order to ensure she will never suffer any consequences for her actions.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
She is on a quest to figure out what her super name will be, since Captain Marvel is already taken. She has been in one show and one movie and still hasn't resolved this issue. Tune in to the next product to see if she'll finally get a name. What is her personality? Stock female Marvel hero number 263. She's quippy, sarcastic, and indistinguishable from the rest of the pack. Now it's time to talk about Fantastic Four First Steps and the Invisible Woman. The team as a whole in this movie suffers from a tremendous lack of character development, and Invisible Woman is no exception. We aren't given much of any insight on who she is as a person, why she wants to be a hero, or what experiences made her the woman she is today. This lack of clarity extends to her powers as well, as the movie just assumes we know how they work without any explanation, then proceeds to show her being vaguely strong enough to stagger Galactus, yet also vaguely limited to the point where doing this causes her to die. So as an audience member, it's really tough to care about her story, because there's hardly any context for anything she says or does. Her death scene doesn't make you sad, it just makes you confused, and you just have to roll with whatever the writers tell you in exposition, because otherwise it would be impossible to tell what's at stake here. She also flies to space while 9 months pregnant, while acting like she somehow cares about the safety of her child. Moron. Also in this movie is Shalla-Bal as the Silversurfer. In the comics, Shalla-Bal only ever appears as the Silversurfer once in an obscure comic, where she's only featured in a 4-panel long death scene, and apparently these 4 panels were good enough for Marvel to prioritize this character and give her a spot in the MCU over the real Silversurfer, even though he is a very well-established fan favorite with countless comic appearances. They just can't help but do stupid crap like this all the time. These dumb decisions are why the MCU is failing. Just make the characters how they're supposed to be. No one wants these new interpretations or wacky twists. You can push back at me and call me a nitpicker, say it's no big deal, but the numbers are out there and they don't lie. The MCU is failing. These movies aren't making any money. This is why. Stop doing this. Let's call a spade a spade. These are not legitimate characters with deep and well thought out storylines and themes. They are rushed assembly line slop that are designed to be safe and appeal to the most shallow of casual audiences. The type of people who have no issue with turning their brains off in order to have a good time. Well, sorry to say, but I happen to like my brain, and I prefer stories that reward my brain for functioning when I consume them. There are still other characters I haven't mentioned, but it doesn't really matter because the same criticisms I just stated could still be applied to the ones I missed. These are not real characters. They only exist to earn social political brownie points. They don't have flaws or vulnerabilities. They aren't allowed to be inferior to anybody, especially men, even if you have a villain that you want to be intimidating. writing. It doesn't matter. They can't be better than these ladies. And these ladies don't need arcs, because they aren't here to tell a story. They're here to send a message. They aren't meant to be relatable. They are meant to be perfect. They are meant to be icons that should only be given praise. The way their perfection is displayed is often at the expense of a likable character, usually a guy, and that guy is meant to be doofy and helpless whenever he's around her. In fact, they're even shown to be manlier than the men they're around. They often hate romance, and will find flirting to be a disgusting, heinous act worthy of physical violence. If they ever show any kind of feelings for a man, it's because that man is willing to submit to her will. Now, with that all in mind, there is one more particularly stunning and brave heroine that I've been saving for last.
About to show these boys how we do it. You ready?
Higher, further, faster, baby.
That's right.
You're gonna give me your jacket, your helmet, and your motorcycle, and in return, I'm gonna let you keep your hand.
Take it! Prove to me you can beat me without...
I have nothing to prove to you.
I like this one.
Captain Marvel. She is the bestest, most perfectest hero around, and she is played by the world's most likable actress.
I do all my stunts.
I did my stunts because I thought that that's what everyone did.
I do not need a 40-year-old white dude to tell me what didn't work for him about A Wrinkle in Time. It wasn't made for him.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Back during a simpler age, a more peaceful age, Carol Danvers was once known as Miss Marvel and had obtained Superman-like abilities that were passed over to her from the previous Captain Marvel, a male alien who was quite literally named Mar-Vell, and the Kamala Khan Miss Marvel simply did not exist. Those were the days. Captain Mar-Vell would go on to have one of the most iconic deaths in comics, and would leave Miss Marvel to stand out on her own. During her time as Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers was a solid B-list character, being a frequently reoccurring Avenger with well-rounded powers and who had some interesting outer space adventures. However, that would all change when the all-new, all-different era of Marvel Comics came around in the early 2010s. This era was based around changing everything just for the sake of being different. This era was the death of Marvel Comics, and was when I personally stopped reading. Also around this time, DC had their own Captain Marvel, but after some long legal battling, he now became known as Shazam, with no character currently holding the Captain Marvel title. Marvel Comics felt the need to take advantage of this opportunity, but rather than bringing Mar-Vell back, they sought to give Miss Marvel a promotion. She was given an overhauled design, or a few, with varying degrees of success. She was given a significant power boost, her personality was changed, and she was brute forced into being the new face of Marvel, whether fans wanted her or not. And to no one's surprise, fans weren't really into this, because Carol Danvers had already been around for a long time, and while she was decently appreciated, she was never close to being on the level of characters like Spider-Man or the Hulk in terms of popularity. She had decades of time to reach that level, but simply never broke out. Plus, these new changes they gave her as Captain Marvel weren't exactly better. Her new design often suffered and gave off big Karen energy. Her attitude became much more aggressive, arrogant, and feministic, which obviously wasn't exactly appealing to your average comic book fan. She also became a Mary Sue of sorts. That's a bit of an overused term these days, but it still applies, because she was made to be so powerful that her stories became void of any stakes or tension, and because of all these different factors, her books failed constantly, having gathered little to no audience. But Marvel insisted on making her work, so they rebooted her time and time again to the same amount of crickets. So, naturally, because of her many failures, Marvel sought to skip over dozens of other better heroes and storylines, and gave her a solo film. They didn't even consider covering the death of Captain Mar-Vell, they just turned him into an old lady. Nor did they want to feature any of her more likable stories as Miss Marvel. No, they skipped straight over to the modern crap, and gave us the exact opposite of what we asked for. A remarkably stale movie about a perfect and most powerful woman, who needs to learn the life lesson that everybody else is wrong, and she just needs to believe in herself in order to succeed.
I have nothing to prove to you.
Her personality is that of a flat plank of wood, so to remedy that in the sequel, they tried to give her some of that classic Marvel comedy that we all love. But all that resulted in was a personality that would completely change from one scene to the next. Speaking of the sequel, her first movie did so well that they thought a team-up movie could generate some much needed interest. However, producing even more Marvels turned out to be an incredibly unpopular idea. Who would have thought? So all this movie ended up up being is one of the worst performing superhero films of all time, which was actually quite the accomplishment in and of itself. The best course of action they should take with Captain Marvel at this point is to just give up and stop. There is no point in trying to keep making this disaster work. The fans have clearly spoken many times over on this. We couldn't be more clear. We don't want this Captain Marvel. Let it die. There are so many other cooler, more fascinating heroes and stories that would be more worth investing time and money on. Even if you still demand a female lead, there are plenty of better options to pick from. Not that you're capable of adapting good stories for them, but they are out there. And that's really the point of this whole video. You MCU creatives try so hard to push this feminist agenda, but it is completely pointless, because Marvel already has countless likable female characters. But since you apparently resent the classic comics, you don't realize that. So you either make crappy new female characters, or you take previously great female characters and ruin them, because you've become so obsessed with your representation quota that you've either forgotten or fired the people who actually knew how to make these characters likable and interesting. Forcing agendas where they don't belong is an annoying concept on its own, but they can at least be tolerable if the stories are good and entertaining. In fact, that's the best way to win people over to your side. Just make your products good. Unfortunately, your work lately has been far from good. Rather, they are some of the worst shows and movies to ever be released. And that's no exaggeration. And all the while, that's with completely forced agendas caked over everything. It is the worst of both worlds. To get a better idea of what I'm talking about, and see what they should do differently, we should keep looking at Marvel, actually. Only a different corner of it. I don't know what happened here or what caused this show to be so different, but X-Men 97 on Disney Plus turned out to be one of Marvel's all-time greatest adaptations, and is a perfect example of how to do things the right way. I highly recommend this show, so please check it out if you haven't already. X-Men 97 is especially great for this conversation, because that show is jam-packed with female characters, who for the most part are handled fairly well. Jean Grey is shown to be a powerful and capable member of the team, and can even lead the group should the situation call for it. But her strength and skill is never given to her at the expense of the male cast. Cyclops is also shown to be a great and powerful leader, and these two can simply coexist as a healthy and supportive couple. They have their drama, sure, but it's a give and take. One is not shown to clearly be better than the other, and they both desire to make the other happy. Rogue is another standout character in this series. She is caught in a bit of a love triangle that leads her to make decisions that she will heavily regret, and she will have to struggle to live with. She is established to be hot-tempered, similarly to Captain Marvel, but unlike Captain Marvel, this is shown to be a negative trait that will often lead Rogue into trouble. She will make mistakes, and she will learn and grow. That is what we like to see in a well-developed character. Storm is shown to be as powerful as ever, yet she is also shown to be vulnerable, and she has weaknesses that make her more relatable and someone you want to root for. And Jubilee, you know, she's there too. Anyway, as a whole, these women are all very powerful, but they are far from Mary Sue's, having many struggles and flaws to deal with in just 10 episodes of TV. Sometimes they need to get rescued. Sometimes they do the rescuing. Sometimes they are in the right. Sometimes they are in the wrong. The main difference between them and the MCU women is that the X-Men 97 women aren't written to simply be strong, independent females and nothing more. They are written to be solid, well-rounded characters that go beyond a surface-level trait like gender. And what's most important to point out here is that X-Men 97 did not have to deviate very far from the comics at all to pull this off. The comics became popular for a reason, and the comics contain dozens of well-liked female characters. Not every comic is good, far from it. But we have the benefit of hindsight, and we can look back and see which comics worked and which ones didn't. The MCU fails itself by holding this arrogant stance that the comics are these old outdated errors that need to be corrected by today's progressive, self-indulgent modern writers. But they haven't improved anything. All they've done is tear apart characters and stories that never needed fixing in the first place.
We want over half our heroes to be female.
Why? What was wrong with the way it used to be? Who asked for this? Certainly not enough people to break even at the box office. Why don't you just focus on faithfully adapting the stories from the comics that are already beloved, instead of embarking on this unnecessary, unwanted sexist vendetta? This mission was always going to be a failure because Marvel's female characters were already great, and reducing them to be nothing more than their gender is a desperate, pandering, and shallow attempt to cater to a niche audience that never really cared about these movies in the first place. Go back to the basics. Go back to what worked before. Then maybe you'll start making money again. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give a like and subscribe.